think we already hit the midpoint? Do you think there's going to be like 5 chapters left? How many chapters did you say were into this arc, Kamui? We're already 5, 6, 7, 5,
we're
4?
6.
6.
We've done 6.
And so we're going into 7?
I believe, yeah, because the first chapter is chapter 14. You got to include it. Okay. So that means what chapter are we on?
We're going on to 20.
Done 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Yeah,
to be fair,
done 6 chapters.
So, okay, chapter 14, which chapter is that? Because similar to Search for Tsunade, I'm not going to count the in-between stuff as an arc.
Chapter.
Okay.
You have to count it, though, because it's doing too much. Like, for Boruto's presenting information on the Shinju, it's setting up Shikamaru, going behind the Leaf Village's back, doing Boruto things. Setting up Mitsuki doing the same. It's setting foundations for a lot of stuff that is going to happen. Also, it's the chapter that Kankuro tells them what happened to Shinki and Gaara. So, too many things happen in that chapter to not count it.
I mean, again, I don't like counting in between arc stuff as part of the next arc. The Promised Neverland between season 1 and season 2, I would include for that. The Search for Tsunade, Itachi's invasion, I would include that. There's a lot of things. Even the beginning of Boruto 2 Blue Vortex, we argued about this in the past.
The problem, I know you don't want to count like Search for Tsunade, but the problem is the arc started before Itachi showed up. Itachi showing up is almost like an interruption to the arc in a sense, but not exactly, but kind of. The arc had already started.
Well, at that point, the pain arc is weird because it intersplices with the fated battle between brother arcs.
Well, no, that's so, but that's not the pain arc. So here's the thing. Growing up, I used to view, this is technically wrong, but I used to view like Jiraiya versus Pain as the start of the Pain arc, and Itachi versus Sasuke was just in the middle. And then obviously Naruto versus Pain's like the end. That's just wrong. Technically, you've got Sasuke versus Orochimaru all the way until the end of Sasuke versus Itachi is the Itachi pursuit arc.
Yes.
And then you have the Pain arc.
Yes.
So the Pain arc isn't interspliced with Itachi versus Sasuke, which is a different arc.
Well, you know what I mean, though.
It's more that Jiraiya versus Pain is just kind of in there, but it does work from certain perspectives thematically, with the kind of like seeing reality through illusion stuff, which is a recurring thing that happens in all the fights, and it does work with Jiraiya versus Pain. So technically, it still fits in the arc, even if it's plot-wise a little bit separate. It does work thematically, so it's still fine.
I mean, I definitely think Boruto Chapter 14 doesn't thematically work with the themes of the current arc. It's similar to Naruto, like the first 5 episodes before Land of Waves. I'm not going to count that as Land of Waves.
No, okay, I've got the crazy argument for you.
Oh, God.
Ibiki's love for Naruto was put on full display in this interrogation.
But the problem is, that's not how they treat it. He's not doing that out of irrationality. He's doing it because it makes no sense.
Yeah.
Which sounds like the same thing, but it's not.
No, but I mean, the real reason is because, more than anything, Kankuro saying, hey, sand problems, it's in that chapter. Unless you're going to say the arc starts in the middle of the chapter,
Well, you could do that, first of all. But again, I wouldn't even say that's necessarily a thing. I think that's getting to the arc. For example, I'm not going to count the Sasuke retrieval arc, the first moment Orochimaru wants Sasuke. Just for example.
I mean, it's kind of a weird, I'll say this much, it's a weird start and end for the arcs in general. As we know, the arc just ends so abruptly, weirdly in the first place. It is kind of a weird chapter situation. So you could argue for different sides on this, but...
Yeah, well, I'm not going to say the arc starts as late as the moment they get to the Sand Village, but I'm not going to start it from, the moment after Boruto is shot, for example. Like, I think there is transitionary parts that transition from one arc to another, but aren't a part of any arc in particular. I think that's fine.
Yeah, I just don't think that's really the case in this case. I think chapter 14 just is. Because otherwise, you wouldn't count chapter 15 either. That would be just as transition-y, not arcy.
What was chapter 15?
It's a chapter with the Shinki flashback, Boruto talking to Kawaki about his limiters, and something happened in the middle. Oh, there's a Ko talking to the Shinju.
Well, the Shinki flashback in particular sounds next arcy, but...
Well, so does Konkuro talking about Shinki and the Sand Village being invaded.
Nah. Well, we gotta agree, disagree.
Everything else in that chapter
has
nothing to do with the arc, by the way. But what is Code has even appeared since? He's real relevant to this arc, huh?
You know, that is a curious and intervening way to try to think about it. When would you consider the beginning of an arc? When the information that's key for that arc starts? Like Kankuro saying, hey, this happened? Or would you consider it when the actual characters begin actively engaging with that arc? It's an interesting way to try to think about when you would consider each arc actually engaging or engaging with the main plot of the story. When that arc becomes the A story in that arc.
That's interesting, yeah, in that regard.
Yeah, because like hypothetically, would you not count, I think it's episode 6, where they're just going on random missions and then Naruto's complaining he wants a better mission, and then they meet Kazuma and the mission just barely starts? I mean, the mission probably starts, but like, would the arc quote unquote start the moment they leave the village rather than the beginning of the episode?
No, it would start at the beginning of the episode, but my argument was those first 5 episodes don't count.
Well, because you already mentioned it earlier, that's why I just skipped to that.
Sure.
Also because it's like a direct example to like Konkuro calling for the mission versus everything leading up to that. It's because the Boruto example is not a 5-episode situation.
But that's just giving information. That's not
the whole what if Naruto ended here thing that we were going to do, that we're still going to do. But like, in a sense, like episode 1 is almost like its own arc. And then episodes 2 through 5 are like the bell test arc. Even though they all do work thematically with the Land of Waves, they're just completely separate plot things, first of all. But they even tell their own specific self-contained stories that do work in tandem with the Land of Waves, but they do work on their own entirely, to the point that it's almost like 3 mini arcs.
Sure. Well, let's just use JJK as an example. I don't remember the first time Shibuya is brought up, but let's just say it's at like the end of an episode.
1, like Mahito or Fate Gato are just like, can't wait for Shibuya or something.
Okay, let's not even count that because it's season 1. When is it first brought up in season 2? Just to be even more fair.
Probably just the first episode after Hidden Inventory.
Okay. I don't
like
remember
at the very
which episode
least,
that was.
Like the Mekamaru fight's pretty darn early, and they're talking about it at the latest then. Because I know Mahito's like, oh, I'll be ready for Shibuya at the end of that fight. That would be the absolute latest they mention it.
Okay. So, would you count that as part of Shibuya?
Well, it technically is, anyway, but...
See, what I'm thinking...
I gotta walk away and wash my hands, so you talk, and I'll come back in like a minute or 2.
Okay. What I'm thinking is, whenever they tell a story, and then at the end of the episode or chapter or arc or whatever, they present that new information that leads into the next arc. And this is what exactly I've described the Shikamaru talking to Konkuro thing is. They're doing the Boruto interrogation, and then at the end of that chapter, Konkuro calls them, hey, sand mission. They're getting to the next story.
I can agree with that. Think of it in video game terms, it would be when you get the actual new quest or journey opened up is when you get the information about it. So I would actually switch to say that would be the case, that whenever you get the new information about what the new arc is, that's when, because it's kind of like when you get excited about your favorite arc, and then you hear them say the thing that keys it in, that's when that new arc is beginning. So it's kind of like when in Solo Leveling when they talked about Jeju Island, and they're like, yeah, so the Jeju Island raid is about to begin. That's the Jeju Raid Island arc. That it's already been started before that part. That's when the battle starts. The Jeju Island arc starts all the way back right after he basically gets his new ranking and everything like that, and they confirm that's the Jeju Island arc because they're getting S ranks. So technically, it covers, anime-wise, it would cover the vast majority, about 2/3 of season 2 is the Jeju Island arc.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is only going to make sense to Oodie, I think, unless both of you, Ace and Kido, have watched or played Poppy's Playtime. But so is there like the end of chapter 3? Like, is that just, or beginning of chapter 4? Is that just not chapter 4 or 3? Are those just transition?
I mean,
the difference with a lot of these manga chapters is that unlike some, so like in the Boruto anime especially, they do have transition episodes that just really aren't part of an arc sometimes. Sometimes it's kind of vaguely works. So like in between the Kara actuation arc and the vessel arcs, there are just, see, that was really weird because like the Victor episodes work as being like part of an arc, but then like other episodes like the Aeon Gate whatever nonsense is just kind of in there. It's not really either arc. Like they just blatantly is just something else. And there's some examples that are probably way more concretely just transition episodes that aren't an arc. But like with these manga chapters, they don't generally do that. They kind of just go one arc to the next.
Okay, Kamui.
At least in the manga
I disagree.
I've read.
I disagree because you're saying manga arcs. I think it would be the manga series. The manga series can tell its own story outside of arcs. Arcs are just defining set parts of the series, but it's not like they have to go strictly from arc to arc. They can tell as long of a story as they want.
I feel like in the manga I've read, they kind of just do.
For the most part, I would agree. But
I was going to say they normally can, but I would say the good ways that we were kind of thinking about is that when you get the information about what's about to happen for the new arc, such as when it's first being mentioned, that's the start of an arc, or when something is definitively ended for an arc, such as in Naruto, the Sasuke retrieval arc ends at the end when the final battle is over. Or if you wanted to take the tuning exam, it ends once the battle and all that starts and the tuning exam is technically over.
Mm-hmm.
The tuning exam at that point is over, and now it's a battle and everything that's going on. And it becomes a completely different arc because it's a whole new focus of the story. So the best way I would say is whenever
for Boruto though, chapter 13, the Jura Hidari nation is just over. They left. And now we're just looking at completely different things. Like that arc definitively ended in chapter 13.
Which would then count as the beginning of a new arc. It's just not clear what that arc might be right away.
Yeah. But chapter 14 would still be the start of the new arc. In fact, now I wouldn't argue this, but you could even go as far as to argue that the new arc starts with Boruto's flashback with Kamui. But I probably wouldn't argue that.
Okay, so Kamui, the reason I don't like your Poppy Playtime analogy is because let's look at a different chapter. Where would you say chapter 3 starts?
See, the problem is I don't even remember.
That's the catnap one. The catnap one.
No, I don't remember how exactly.
Okay,
chapter 2
well, let me tell you.
Exactly.
Because you remember what chapter 2 ends with. Chapter 2 ends with him on the train. The train crashes. No, Mommy Long was chapter 2. Chapter 2 ends with the train. Chapter 1 is Huggy Wuggy. What do you mean, Gomez? It wasn't that long ago.
Oh, okay.
My God. Why are you saying just answer it after I already answered it? Oh, okay. You listen. My goodness. Think before you speak. Okay, so chapter 1 is Huggy Wuggy. Chapter 2, Mommy Longlegs. Chapter 2 ends with them getting on the train and then Poppy betraying them by making the train crash. Chapter 3 opens with the scripted cutscene of you on the train after it's crashed for like 5 seconds before Catnap drags you away and throws you down in the trash compactor, and then you're first able to move when the trash compactor is actually moving. That's when I would say chapter 3 begins. doesn't begin on the train, begins when you're moving in the trash compactor room after the trash compactor's already started.
I mean, you could argue for either.
I don't think you can. And same with going between chapter 3 and 4. You're just choosing that because that's the arbitrary point where they decided to end chapter 3. That's not necessarily the best moment, or they should have ended chapter 3, because they could have ended it after the speech Poppy gave once you got to the bottom of the pit or thing, whatever, to go into the hell thing that she describes. I would say it's whenever you're actually able to play down there when that next chapter actually begins. Because what does it do? Poppy just goes back up to deal with what happened at the end of chapter 3. That's still telling the same story. You're not beginning the next story until you start going through
here's the problem.
Hell area.
But from chapters 2 to 3, Catnap appearing and doing something has then started something new. The end of chapter 2 is the train crashing. Catnap throwing you down into the trash compact whatever thing is a new addition. It's starting something new. Catnap's action started something new, independent of the final act that Poppy does in chapter 2. So you could argue, like, you know, the moment Catnap drags you away, that's the start of chapter 3 as well, which is what the cutscene does. So that's why I'm not gonna say what is objectively the case. I'm just gonna say you could argue for either.
Okay.
But they're also so closely intertwined. It's such a small span of time that it's like, okay, we're getting really pedantic.
Yeah.
An entire chapter, arguably 2 chapters. Okay, now we're getting into like of a monthly manga. It's like, okay, this is a bit more of a wide scale spectrum of when this arc starts.
Sure. Well, but because I'm so glad you used the word new, because I was going to go into something exactly that I want to talk about anyways. So stories have a beginning, middle, and end, specifically arcs in this case, since that's what we're talking about. If the arc is starting with Boruto captured to be interrogated, he's quote unquote in jail. If you remember all those Naruto explained thumbnails, when's Boruto going to escape out of jail? We made a couple community polls on it. He escaped the very next chapter. I wouldn't say that's part of the arc if that's a conflict that's in that chapter. Because they wouldn't start the arc with that and then have him escape.
I agree,
at the beginning of the arc.
I think it's bad.
I would probably say that's more just subverting that you thought that was going to be the actual key point of the arc when that was just one plot point that was quickly resolved.
See, but the problem is that you can't do that if it's the first plot point.
Only if it's just explaining how one character gets from one place to the point. It's not a major plot point. It's just a plot point.
So then what would you say the hook of this arc is? What's the promise of the premise?
Of this current arc?
Yeah.
I would say the key part about this current arc is more Shikamaru style of basically trying to see what they can do about the Shiki situation and helping out the Sand Village, which, for the record, the Sand Village needs help all the time. They needed help in every single arc, for the most part, at some point about something. I would really like it if they'd went to other places to help them out instead, but I get Sand Village, Gaara, BFFs, but I would like to see something else more often. Either way, the best way I would say about this arc currently, it seems to be about resolving the issues around the Senju that seem to be more focused on Ryu and Matsuri versus all of the Senju. It seems like they're focusing on just those individuals, which isn't the most clarified way to say about what the arc is about, but that's what it feels like to me. As I should say I am more interested in them resolving this issue about the Senju once and for all and getting some more definitive answers. Even if they're bad answers, I still would like them to have answers about the Senju, because currently it's just Boruto and getting the information through his connection, which I feel like they should be a bit better and more advanced at information gathering as ninja and try to understand a little bit more about what's going on.
Okay. Yeah, and I would completely agree with that. And I would say no matter what your answer was, if Kamui or Kido has a different answer, if I did have a different answer, the arc would start wherever you think that premise comes from, because obviously the hook is at the beginning of the story. It's what gets you into the story.
The problem is, and this is why I think chapter 4 is just kind of weird in general, because from certain perspectives, it would feel like this just is the start of a new arc. But from other perspectives, it feels like it's the end of the previous arc. And that's why I said it kind of just goes from this arc to the next so seamlessly that it makes it weird to say like when it ends it starts from a certain perspective. Because like, yeah, which is why it's also why the whole reason why you're arguing is just a transition thing that isn't even part of the arc. But that gets especially, I hate to say it,
I think it's
bad in this case from this perspective. This, I hate to say it, this interrogation is one of the most pointless chapters of Boruto. It's up there with chapter 2. In that, I mean, obviously, like, a little bit of cool moments for Shikamaru and Mitsuki, whatever. For the most part, it's just recap we don't need, and characters saying things we don't need to hear, and characters doing things that make no sense that didn't need to happen. You could have just had Boruto escape, and 99% of the story is still there. You don't need this chapter. And at that point, if it's not even part of one of the arcs, why is this chapter here? For 90% of it. Obviously, there's some things that need to be there, like Shikamaru being sus. Assuming that's going to go anywhere, not be a false gun, then that, yes, that needs to be there. But yeah, you get the idea.
Yeah. So what chapter did they arrive in the Sand Village at the end of it?
Let's check.
Because I would say whatever
chapter. I think it's the end of chapter 16.
16. I would say 16 is the latest the arc could have started.
Yeah.
Which would include all of the beginning of that arc.
15 could have arguably been transition.
Yeah.
Chapter 16 definitely is in the arc.
I
although
completely agree.
I hate to say it, the Flying Raijin flashback could debatably be outside of the arc. Because it's like minimally
That's funny.
Involved. Like the Singularity of Fate stuff hasn't even been relevant yet, but Sarada and Sumire arguing is definitively like in this arc. No way around it.
100%,
yeah.
And same with obviously Shikamaru talking to Ada's hair frog.
Exactly. Like it's literally discussing how the mission's gonna work and stuff like that's just definitively in this arc.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned this because at least this is common ground we can agree on. Obviously, this is before they get to the Sand Village, and so it's them assigning
the mission. Essentially, it's like develop.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like Naruto talking to Tazuna inside the Hokage office. It's just like...
Well, it's even just like the episode 6, I'm assuming that's the episode anyways, where Naruto's going on the cat mission before he goes on the Land of Waves. But that isn't just a transition. That's to directly juxtapose the important mission that he gets afterwards by setting it up that Naruto wants that. So it is directly important for that. It's also just establishing... essentially Homer's Odyssey, their ordinary world before that's shaken up, showing what's happened and what normal life is looking like right now. Same with the Mirai manga, they do that same idea, but either way. But Kido Maki,
what do you think?
Yo, what's up?
Hey, Kido.
What do you think, Kido?
Thoughts?
What's the question?
Well, we were hoping you would have an answer
from the past half hour.
Everything we've said over the last 2 hours.
You've been saying a lot, bro. So
you should have a lot to respond with. Your options are open.
For a while.
You have to be more
finished
specific.
The whole ass video essay responding to us. I imagine.
Okay.
What I will say is this is my hard out because I have other things I got to get to still for the night. I appreciate it being here, guys. But Kido, take it away. And I would say you can always talk about the latest chapter. That's always a good part.
I mean, that is a seamless transition.
And Ace's description is in the link below in the description to his Twitch. I'm assuming that's where you still want me to link to, assuming you
can link everything to my Twitch, where I'll be much more active starting tomorrow, actually.
Oh,
so I'll be streaming every single day this week.
Maybe even reacting to my Attack on Titan episode, but no problem.
I will throw that on the list for tomorrow because I don't have time now to watch it tonight.
Yeah, cool.
So I'll throw that in there.
All right, sounds good.
All right, catch you guys later.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And back to Kido.
Yeah, what's up, man?
So Kido, when do you think this arc started?
This arc. This I think that would be chapter 15, right?
At what part in particular? Like, what scene would you say this arc started?
The scene?
Yeah.
Uh,
The
I don't remember the
that starts
scene.
this arc.
I just know it. I think it's chapter 15 though. Like when they kind of just got into the mission, really.
Well, they
I don't
don't
know.
get into the mission in chapter 15.
I mean, like get
the
into the
most
details of it.
mission-y you have is just
Okay,
the
details of the mission,
flashback
yeah.
of what happened to Shinki, but that's not getting into the mission.
No, well, later on in the chapter, isn't that the same chapter that Kashin Koji spoke to Shikamaru?
Nope, that's chapter 16.
That's 16. Okay. Well, I don't know.
Ooh.
I think it's 15 though. Like from as you said, the flashback to that and all that stuff. No, probably 15. I think the prior one closed off in 14, because 14 kind of previewed the sand mission
I
at the
agree.
end. So
Yeah.
naturally, the following chapter would be the arc that started, right?
I completely agree. Yeah, I was going to use some other analogies, examples for that, but yeah, I'm glad you said that
So
way.
you think chapter 14 is part of the Hidari Jura arc then?
No. It's more so like it's the end of the prior. I mean, typically in any story, when you end an arc, not really. It's more like a transition. Like even in really any story, like when you end an arc, it always transitions to the next one in the end portion of the prior one.
Not
right?
in Kamui
Yes,
or else
stories.
it's not in, but that doesn't mean the transition isn't in that previous arc.
That
I
doesn't
mean,
make
like,
sense.
you could argue that the page definitely is, but I don't know if the entire chapter is.